This is It Was a Thing on TV.
Total Red Man has ever done something like this to me! It's, time!
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the dregs of humanity!
Welcome to the It Was a Thing on TV podcast. Episode 2, Submission 002, Mr. Smith, which aired on NBC from September 23rd of 1983 to December 16th of 1983 for a total of 13 episodes. Hi, I'm Mike Klaus, and Greg Diener is back here again. Hello, Greg.
Hello, and Mike, we have our third co-host with us for the very first time on this podcast.
Yes, the third half of this podcast is with us.
Finally!
Finally, it's the one and only Chico Alexander.
The third half of the podcast that is the fifth part of the third trilogy. I don't know how this is going to work here.
The math works somehow. I don't know how we got there.
Well, you're the math teacher, so yeah.
Oh, sure. Put it on me. So we're here today to talk about Mr. Smith. This is sort of a segue from last week because Mr. Smith, we first found out about it when watching these Match Game Hollywood Squares reruns maybe about 3 weeks ago, and they had many questions about Mr. Smith, which in turn made us have many questions about Mr. Smith, and we have some answers. Unfortunately, we're not going to talk much about the show itself because there just isn't any video out there.
Oh, no.
And Greg actually had an idea for that. Tell him your idea.
Oh, my idea is we should, after this episode, and I found out that Mr. Smith is owned by Paramount Television, which means it's in the CBS Viacom family. So after this episode, Mike, I'm going to go down to the CBS offices. I'm going to go down to picket in front of the CBS offices demanding we want Mr. Smith on CBS All Access.
Or at least on Hulu or Netflix or Amazon Prime, someplace that the masses can enjoy this for the first time in 36 years.
Hey, Mike, if they can reboot the XFL, I'm sure they can reboot Mr. Smith.
Well, in the course of TV...
Can I bring something up here?
Absolutely. The chair recognizes the chairman.
You said Mr. Smith is owned by CBS Viacom, right?
Yes.
So is Pluto TV.
Oh.
Right?
I see where he's going.
Mr. Smith on a Mr. Smith channel on Pluto TV. The same 13 episodes run over and over again. I'd watch it.
Would anybody else?
No.
Have you seen the obscure stuff they have on Pluto?
Yes, sir, I have.
Yeah, they got obscure stuff on Pluto. It's called Buzzer. But, yeah, so about Mr. Smith, Mr. Smith is another attempt to use simian creatures on television with marginal success. There was J. Fred Muggs on the Today Show back in the 50s, and you had in the 70s, early 70s, you had Lancelot Link, which lasted all of 13 episodes. Oh, maybe we might have another entry there somewhere down the road. And there's been other instances of using monkeys, gorillas, apes on TV shows. Obviously, Friends had Marcel. Not that Marcel did anything besides act like a little monkey. But 1983's Mr. Smith was a little different because Mr. Smith really was the main character. Briefly, Mr. Smith, and I'm taking this from the 1983 TV Guide Fall Preview. Oh, by the way, which had Mr. Smith as one of 3 characters on the cover. So if that didn't say that NBC wasn't like banking everything on this, nothing does.
It wouldn't be the biggest gamble NBC ever paid.
No, definitely not the biggest.
That comes down the line, I think.
That's spoiler. That's a later date. We know what we're talking about. But Mr. Smith, in addition to being on the fall TV preview installment of TV Guide in 1983, he also had his own cover. So in the span of 3 months, this bum got on the cover of TV Guide twice. And Joni Loves Chachi only got on once. Where is there justice in this world? Now, I don't know about that, but it's just amazing how much NBC pushed this, and we're going to get into that in a second. I do want to read the capsule that NBC, or rather TV Guide, has here for Mr. Smith, which probably will sum up the show and give you enough information that all the information you need to know. The star of this series, Mr. Smith, has an IQ of 256, plays chess, and writes treatises on thermonuclear dynamics. Okay, I need to compose myself.
Oh, you'll see why he's laughing in a moment, friends.
Well, as Alfred Hitchcock might say, you can imagine the producers had to scour Hollywood for an actor who could simulate intelligence. Ha 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 ha. The result of their search is pictured at right. Mr. Smith is a talking orangutan who, in an ambitious attempt to make Washington even funnier than it is, works as a special consultant to the U.S. government, helping out with little problems like MX missile policy. With a premise like that, it's safe to assume we'll hear a monkey joke or two. Mr. Smith works for peanuts. TV Guide actually wrote that. Mr. Smith works for peanuts. As our hairy hero copes with his dumb but likable owner, Tammy. Maybe it's Timmy. It looks like Tammy.
I think it's Tommy.
Tommy. Okay. Well, it would be kind of weird for a person named Tammy to be played by Tim Dunnigan. Tommy's little sister, Ellie, Laura Jacoby, a pretty psychologist, Tracy, and I can't read that word, maybe malicious? I can't see what that word is. Liaison man, no. Leonard Fry was not malicious. A liaison man.
How do we know this? Because there's no episodes on YouTube.
Yeah, there's no footage, so how would we know?
Well, we got an open, but the open doesn't have Leonard Fry. But yeah, he is some sort of delicious liaison man, Raymond Leonard Fry. Raymond is on the prickly side, but who wouldn't be playing second banana to an ape?
Maybe he was the Dr. Smith to the robot.
Yeah, there's the Dr. Smith to the Mr. Smith.
He was the Dr. Smith to the Mr. Smith. Or the Dr. Smith to the Mr. Who or something like that. But so the one thing that I noticed regarding the episodes, at least the episode guides, the listing of the shows, the episode names themselves, it's sort of like a precursor to Monk. If you've ever seen Monk, it's always Mr. Monk gets a colonoscopy, Mr. Monk visits the moon, Mr. Monk finds his long-lost brother. That's sort of the case here, except for a number of episodes. The first episode, actually the first 2 episodes, it's a 2-parter. Welcome to Washington, Part 1 and Part 2. But then, Mr. Smith finds his brother. More about that in a bit, right, Greg?
Yes.
Oh,
yes. That'll be so great. I can't wait to tell you all about Mr. Smith's brother.
Mr. Smith operates. And actually, I found the capsule from one of the TV magazines about that. Mr. Smith was actually like making recommendations for an operation on a CIA or FBI agent. I'm not even kidding. Here we go. Talking about finds his brother. Number 5, Mr. Smith rescues Bobo.
Bobo!
Number 6, Mr. Smith falls in love. Aww.
Oh.
Because that's what you do when you're a monkey working. When you're a monkey with high intelligence working in Washington with monkeys of low intelligence, you fall in love.
Well, was Mr. Smith was falling in love with a human, or was he falling in love with a fellow orangutan? I'm going to guess falling in love with a human. That'd be pretty weird.
Greg, do you really want me to go search while we're doing this? I can, and I will.
Oh, Jesus, I shouldn't have said anything.
Greg, while Mike is looking for that, I just want to point out one thing. You just mentioned a monkey falling in love with a human as weird. Because a talking monkey with a 256 IQ is not weird.
No, it's absolutely normal, of course. And actually, I'm sorry, I have the capsule from TV Guide for that.
I just wanted to say, when you said Mr. Monk finds his long-lost lover, I was almost chuckling a bit in the background because I was picturing the thought of Tony Shalhoub trying to find his long-lost brother. Well, Mike, I have a TV Guide listing in front of me on that episode regarding the surgery. Do you want me to read it?
You mean episode 4, Mr. Smith operates.
Yes. Here it is. And I'm not making any of this up in the plot description. Mr. Smith disagrees with a top brain surgeon, and it has the actor's name, which I'm not making up, Olaf Pooley. What a name! Mr. Smith disagrees with a top brain surgeon about a risky surgical procedure planned for an important space scientist.
Okay, a monkey talking to a brain surgeon. I don't know how to. That's just too crazy.
Also, if you're the brain surgeon and why would you be getting advice from an orangutan with a high IQ? It's like, you're the expert brain surgeon. Why are you taking advice from this simian?
Because apparently he doesn't know any better. Remember, he's a doctor.
Because it's 1983 NBC. Enough said.
Yes.
So Mr. Smith falls in love. I found the capsule for that.
Okay.
Mr. Smith falls for a female orangutan who gives TV weather forecasts. Wait, it gets better than that. Wait.
Oh my god.
But wait.
Oh my god. I gotta sit down here.
Yeah, wait, there's more. Let me repeat that without laughter because save it for the end. Mr. Smith falls for a female orangutan who gives TV weather forecasts, but she in turn falls for Bobo.
It's you know what? It's the Fabulous Baker Boys 5 years early. Am I right or am I right?
I didn't know Bobo was a player.
Except Jeff and Bo Bridges did it better than Mr. Smith and Bobo.
Gosh.
Oh my god.
We haven't even gotten halfway through all the episode titles. After Mr. Smith falls in love and then Bobo steals the female TV weather forecasting orangutan away, we have number 7, Mr. Smith gets a physical. Also in that same episode, Mr. Smith rips off a doctor's face after the doctor says, "Turn your head and cough."
Oh god, that sounds painful.
Imagine how it was for Mr. Smith. Number 8, Goodbye, Mr. Smith. But he's not gone because that's episode 8. We still have 5 to go. Number 9, Mr. Smith loses a friend. And I think that when I actually saw the capsule for that too, I think Mr. Smith actually gives a eulogy at a funeral. I'm not even kidding.
Oh, can you imagine Mr. Smith giving a eulogy at a funeral? Like, here to give this eulogy is a talking orangutan that has a 256 IQ.
Number 10, Mr. Smith plays Cyrano. Again, Steve Martin did it better 5 years later. Number 11, Mr. Smith makes a commercial. Number 12, Mr. Smith goes public. And the final episode, which apparently didn't air, or at least there's no date attached to it, Mr. Smith goes to court.
I can only imagine what that was about.
This is why we need Mr. Smith on one of these streaming services. We need to find out why Mr. Smith went to court.
And after that, Mr. Smith went bye-bye.
Mr. Smith says goodbye. The unaired 14th episode.
Mr. Smith says bye-bye, and we don't know what happened to Bobo. Did he run off with the weather-predicting orangutan? Who knows? Did they end up on Cheaters 17 years later? Who knows?
Geez.
Okay. Do you want me to discuss Bobo now?
Tell us about Bobo, please.
Okay, well, a while back, maybe a week or two ago, me and Mike were searching for pictures of stupid television shows in preparation for this podcast for potential topics. And one of the photos we found was from Mr. Smith. And it's a picture of Leonard Fry with Mr. Smith and his brother, Bobo. Now, I'm going to read to you the back of this picture. Okay?
And you found this is one you found on eBay.
Yes. All right. NBC.
This is one nearly one of us bought on eBay.
Oh, you damn bet I was considering buying this. NBC photo, press department, 30 Rock, New York, New York. And the title for this is "What a Family!" exclamation point, all in caps. Okay. The lovable talking genius Mr. Smith and his slower brother Bobo. Let me read it. Mr. Smith and his slower brother Bobo give Mr. Smith's personal secretary, Raymond Hoyk, Leonard Fry, plenty to worry about between national crises and playful antics in the imaginative new comedy series Mr. Smith, Fridays, 8:30 p.m. New York time, premiering this fall on NBC.
Boom, boom, boom.
And actually, that was the more offensive description of Bobo, the slow brother. The other places I've seen him called dim-witted, which is a little more correct, let's say, politically correct. So, yeah, I'm sort of flabbergasted. I don't know where to go with this now.
And let me describe the picture. The picture, Bobo is completely naked wearing a hat.
'Cause aren't we all?
But Mr. Smith is at least dressed in a suit.
Well, Bobo's dim-witted. He doesn't know how to dress himself, apparently. Oh, my gosh. I don't know how to top that, so we're just going to move on. Mr. Smith was probably, and Greg and I were talking about this, the best way of comparing this, the amount of promotion that went into Mr. Smith, is how much promotion NBC gave Whitney back in 2012, 2011?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where they just like pushed it down your throat, and that show, Whitney, lasted 2 seasons at most. And if you ask Greg, it's one of the least funny shows ever.
Oh, it's one of the worst. That should be canceled after the first commercial break.
And then the show that she actually created, Two Broke Girls, I think Greg thinks the same of that, and I definitely do. I cannot stand Two Broke Girls, and that lasted 5 years.
Well, Mike, there are two reasons why that show lasted 5 years, and you know what they are.
Yes, I do.
It's Kat Dennings.
Kat Dennings, the left one, and Kat Dennings, the right one. Oh, my. So, yeah, the NBC...
Are you trying to say that Kat Dennings has enormous talent?
Yes. Amazing talents.
Because she does, she's a genuinely funny individual.
Oh, I'm not doubting that at all.
I almost feel like I should pull up the screen grab from Match Game Hollywood Squares this week of Leonard Fry holding the card that says boobies on it. So, yeah, about the NBC hype machine. Oh, my gosh. I mean, they did everything to make this show succeed. And actually, this show should be, this episode of the podcast, rather, not Mr. Smith, but this episode should be called, Too Hyped to Fail. Yet it did. Because NBC did all sorts of stuff to generate interest. First, as we've mentioned last week, Match Game Hollywood Squares, there are so many mentions of Mr. Smith, Mr. Smith, Mr. Smith. There's questions about Mr. Smith. There's answers of Mr. Smith. And again, that sort of brought us to looking at what is Mr. Smith. And then we went down that rabbit hole, and this is the result of it. And specifically, I think Greg had been anticipating something happening for the last month or so, or 3 weeks. And here it is. This comes from this past Monday on Buzzer. This past Monday, the 14th of October.
It's time for the Match Game. Hollywood Squares. Our quiz from Mr. Smith, Leonard Fry.
Oh, that was fantastic. That was the greatest thing Gene Wood has ever said in his entire career, as I said, and it was worth all the hype.
You were looking forward to that, and your only regret is that we only heard that for 4 days, because that was the Thanksgiving week.
Oh, but there was something even better that week.
Oh, what?
Well, did you happen to catch on the Wednesday show, and we're going to bring this up, that Gene brings up to Leonard that Leonard and Mr. Smith were going to be in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
And that's actually the next thing I wanted to talk about. Yes, Leonard Fry and Mr. Smith, they were in the NBC Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in 1983. And, I mean, this is going to be a totally separate episode in and of itself. But, the entire Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade that year was, only NBC stars. Only NBC cartoons. If you looked at it, I mean, yes, they had Mr. Smith and Leonard Fry. There was Bowser, or rather John Bauman, I should say. He was a little more professional at the time for Match Game Hollywood Squares Hour. There was the cast of We've Got It Made on a float. Another show that didn't last much longer than Thanksgiving in 1983.
Spoilers! Hello?
Mike, we had Matt McCoy singing at the parade.
Yes, we did. But still, it's another show that barely lasted past Thanksgiving. It would be rebooted later, which, again, might be another episode. Wink, 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 wink. And you had Care Bears and Shirt Tails, and I don't think the Smurfs were on there.
I think I'm trying to think. Weren't the Care Bears on another network?
They might have been syndicated,
Care Bears...
Care Bears was on ABC, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think the cartoon was out in 83. I think it was 84 the Care Bears came out. So maybe they were free agents at the time. But I mean, like, the only thing that's missing, and this might be an anachronism, is like, where's the friggin' Snorks?
That is an anachronism.
That's a year later.
I think we're about 3 years away from the Snorks.
No, the Snorks wasn't 86.
I'm wikiing that now.
I'm on Wiki right now.
Snorks was the next year in 84.
Yes, September of 84, and it lasted until 89. Damn. Okay, we must have been very bored as kids back in the mid-80s. Wow. Okay, and they did have Alvin and the Chipmunks, and Alvin and the Chipmunks had premiered on NBC Saturday mornings in 83. So again, like, everything they showed, it was all NBC.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so Mr. Smith and Leonard Fry were in a vehicle in the parade, and this can be found at about an hour and 31 minutes into the parade. You can find it on YouTube. They didn't sing. It looked like all they were doing was waving. It's like, okay, we're not even good enough to sing. Just watch us tomorrow night, Friday night. It's the episode. Oh, let me see what episode was on. Oh gosh, I hope he was getting a physical that night. No, it was Mr. Smith Plays Cyrano.
Oh, yes. Come watch tomorrow night to see Mr. Smith with a giant nose.
Now hold on, I'm just morbidly curious. I've got to see if that's what he really. Okay. Oh, here we go. Yes, I found it. Wait. Oh, I found something else too. Tommy asks Mr. Smith for courtship advice after falling for a lovely doctor. Now, wait a second. How old was Tommy on this show? Because I thought, just based on the name Tommy, with all due respect to Tommy, a good friend of ours.
Tommy was played by Tim Zettigan. Before, I think it was like 5 or 6 years before Captain Power, and like 2 or 3 years after the A-Team.
Okay, Timmy would have been Tommy. Tim Dunnigan, that's his name.
Tim Dunnigan
he was born in 55, so he would have been 28 at the time.
Yeah, Tim Dunnigan had Dirk Benedict's role from the A-Team in the pilot, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, your name's not Tommy unless you're Tommy Z at age 28. You're Tom! You're Thomas! But so, yeah, Tommy asked Mr. Smith for courtship advice after falling for a lovely doctor. Aww. I'm going to puke in a second. And I'm looking at the ratings for the week before. Yeah, Mr. Smith was 60th out of 64 shows. Jennifer Slept Here was 61st. Oh, and for Greg, Goodnight Beantown was 56th.
Oh yeah, that's another thing. If you happen to watch the Friday episode of Match Game Hollywood Squares this past week, which would have been the Monday episode of Week 5, because as we mentioned, the week Leonard Fry was on Week 4 that aired this past week on Buzzer. There were only 4 episodes because it was Thanksgiving week.
Yeah, but they more than made up for it with the references to the Macy's Day Parade on the Wednesday show.
Oh, and apparently Manimal didn't air that week. Oh, darn.
I think it was already on hiatus at that point, Mike.
No, because I told going through the ratings, we haven't even talked about this yet. Mr. Smith started its premiere week in 47th place. Now, again, mind you, it's out of probably 64, 65 shows. But by the end of its run, its final week, it was 63rd out of 65 shows. Only beating a TV show called First Camera, whatever that is, and that's perpetually at the bottom of the ratings in 83 from what I've seen. And it also beat out an ABC News special about the Pope and his Vatican. I wish I was kidding.
So from the sound of it, he was like, it was the absolute worst performing scripted show on that week.
So we talked about Thanksgiving Day Parade. We talked about Match Game Hollywood Squares.
Oh, wait, did you talk about the 900 number?
You beat me to it. We're going to talk about a 900 number.
A 900 number, Mike.
Yeah, a 900 number. And this is actually where the image that you see for this episode came from. There was a 900 number, 940 Smith. So that would be 900 407. What's the M at? 6. So 6474 or 6484.
No, 6484.
Yeah. So that number was a Mr. Smith hotline where at 50 cents a crack, you can call and get some sort of like insider scoop on Mr. Smith. Not like the Corey and Corey hotline of the 80s where, he loves, playing volleyball in the rain. No, like spoilers for the next episode. Yeah, spoiler. Mr. Smith's getting a physical, and he rips off the doctor's face when the doctor says, turn your head and cough. But the funny thing is, well, first off, the screen grab, it says that it's the second message from Mr. Smith. So there was one before it, and presumably more after it. Something interesting I found in the course of researching for today's show. It has to do with NBC and 900 numbers. Sometime around September, maybe August of 1983, NBC ran The Godfather, and they had a 900 number where you could call. What was that? No. They invited.
20 for you to take to work in the morning.
Oh, it was The Godfather, probably.
They invited listeners to call your Godfather, and the number was what we just said, 900-407-6484. So apparently, if you look at this, they used the same number for the Godfather that they used for Mr. Smith. So they had plans to use this number all along. It isn't just happenstance, just coincidence that 900-407-6484 is the Godfather number. However, the Godfather phone line was a huge success. 160,000 callers, or over 160,000 callers, called that number at a cost of 50 cents apiece.
Whoa, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of bananas.
As Gene Snyder would say, $80,000. You heard that, man, $80,000. Then NBC unfurled promos where viewers can call Mr. Smith. Smith is the orangutan hero of one of the network's fall debuting shows. Because, of course, it is. Also, just about Mr. Smith, apparently, we joke about it, but apparently, and this is from a TV critic, the pilot episode was extremely well done. Those exact 3 words, extremely well done. The dialogue was crisp and funny, the technical tricks equally good, but one had to wonder how long such gimmickry would hold viewers' interest. I'd say about 13 weeks.
If that.
But another reason that Mr. Smith died, no, I shouldn't say died, his demise, we talked about the ratings, 47th to begin, and then down to third worst TV show on the week of its final episode. It had to do with the night of the week it aired, but also it had to do with what also aired on NBC that night. And I'm going to use the numbers from the week, that last week of Mr. Smith. So Mr. Smith was 63rd out of 65 shows. After Mr. Smith was Jennifer Slept Here. And Jennifer Slept Here was rated 61st that week. And then after Jennifer Slept Here was Manimal. That was 59th that week. And that was on the Friday lineup. That was Friday night on NBC, which really historically not a lot of people watch TV because they're going to see movies, they're going out, they're doing anything but staying home. The thing is, NBC's fortunes would actually change the following year and 2 years later. Specifically on Friday nights, you had Miami Vice. I mean, Miami Vice is the consummate 80s show.
Oh, yes, that's when you think of the 80s, you think of Miami Vice.
Yep.
Reeboks, no socks, baby.
MTV Cops.
But also, and this is another interesting little tidbit I dug up while doing actual show prep. The voice of Mr. Smith. The voice of Mr. Smith was done by Ed Weinberger. You should know the name, but if you don't, about a year later, he co-created probably the biggest show in the 80s and probably one of the biggest shows of all time, if it wasn't for the legacy that the main star of the show created. Ed Weinberger created The Cosby Show. And Amen and Dear John and a couple other shows. But 12 months later, Ed Weinberger would create The Cosby Show, which was number one in the ratings from basically its entire run, from 84 until 1992. So when you hear Mr. Smith's voice on those reruns Greg's going to get, that's Ed Weinberger, the guy that co-created Cosby Show.
And I got some sad news, Mike. I looked up Ed Weinberger's Wikipedia. There is nothing about Mr. Smith on his Wikipedia.
Well, I didn't say that I found it on Wikipedia. Well, first off, we know Wikipedia is not always correct. Wait, what do you mean Mr. Smith had an IQ of 74 and picked his nose the entire show? Darn Wikipedia. Wait, Bobo had the IQ of 256? No. I'm sorry. Bobo is not the name of a person who has an IQ of 256 or even 156. That's a stereotypical name of somebody that have an IQ of 56. That's horrible now that I think about it. Poor Bobo.
And to label him as slow in the press release. Oh, come on, NBC. What the heck?
Well, he's no Mr. Smith, that's for sure.
The heck were you thinking, Grant Tinker?
Well, he wouldn't be around much longer. But, so yeah, it died after 13 weeks, 3 months, and its legacy would live on a little bit. A little bit. We talked about Match Game Hollywood Squares. Leonard Fry still made appearances on Match Game Hollywood Squares long after Mr. Smith got canceled. I want to say he was on at least 3 or 4 more weeks, and he was just identified as Leonard Fry. Not to take anything away from Leonard Fry, but his resume is like really, really bland. He earned a supporting Oscar nomination in 1971 for Fiddler on the Roof, and then Mr. Smith, the end. I mean, that's essentially what his resume is, sadly. I mean, he did, bit appearances, cameos. I saw he was on Murder, She Wrote, but he was not on many shows, at least in a lead capacity. And unfortunately, not to put a sour note on all this, Leonard Fry did pass away in 1988, just before the age of 50. He was 49. So, unfortunately, we don't know what Leonard Fry could have done because he had such a reasonably short life. But, yeah, the legacy with Match Game Hollywood Squares, supposedly, even after Mr. Smith had been canceled, Match Game Hollywood Squares was still doing jokes about Mr. Smith. Whether the NBC liked this or not is another story, but it did prove, I would assume it was good fodder for laughter. Even though they could have done Manimal jokes, they could have done Jennifer Slept Here jokes. I think the reason that they picked Mr. Smith is because this was the big show. This was promoted so much between the 900 number, the Thanksgiving Day parade. You heard what I said, TV critics said about the pilot, that it was well done, and it just fell on its face. And sadly, all there is for us to see is a 1-minute opening from the TV show, which you heard earlier.
And there's a bunch of promos for the Friday night lineup, including Mr. Smith on YouTube.
Yeah, but there's no actual footage in terms of like from the show itself. Nobody wanted to waste that expensive videotape in 1983 salvaging 1 minute of this. Well, they did salvage 1 minute, but not 2 minutes. And we talked about NBC's horrible lineups, at least up until Miami Vice. But Miami Vice is on at 10 o'clock, though, so I'm going to give it a bit of a pass there. But the shows that followed on Friday night for ages on NBC might be covered on this podcast in the future. Specifically, I'm thinking of Misfits of Science, which came in 85. I can't think of many more, but the thing is, NBC never really had a hit on Friday nights outside of Miami Vice.
Nope.
I think we'll have to do more research on that. I'm sure a lot of stuff that aired between 8 and 10 on Friday nights, maybe since 83. Well, I mean, nowadays, it's a Dateline at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and that's been running forever.
It's Keith Morris in town on Friday night, baby.
Would you please take a seat over there? Thank you.
No. That is...
That's Chris Hansen, I know, but it's still in the Dateline family.
No, but Keith Morrison's the... So you witnessed a murder, huh? That must have been wild.
Spoiler, the boyfriend did it. But yeah, we talked about Manimal and Jennifer Slept Here. Should I say it, Greg?
What?
That we're covering those two shows in the next 2 episodes?
Oh yeah, we should. We should definitely say it.
Okay. Next week, we are covering Manimal, and actually it's a 2-parter. Manimal, and we're going to cover Automan, because there's a little bit of overlapping between the two.
Even though technically Automan was not an NBC show.
Even though
it was on ABC, and it was on a different network at a different time.
It was on a different network, a different time, ABC, but it was equally bad. Actually, it was actually laughable. I told Greg this, and I told Chico this. I saw something on YouTube. I think actually Chuck Wagner posted like 10 minutes from Automan, and I turned it off after 5 minutes because I couldn't just watch just see how stupid and insipid it was.
I can only imagine Mike watching Automan and 5 minutes in, leaving the room like, nope, I'm not going to watch anymore.
Well, guess what I'm doing is show prep for next week.
Watching a full episode of Automan.
At least making it through the 10 minutes of Automan. And then we're going to talk Manimal, which...
Oh, I can't wait. That's going to be great.
I don't even know if I can make 5 minutes take 5 minutes.
And we're going to answer the question, is Simon McCorkadale and Chuck Wagner separated at birth? No, seriously, look at the two of them together.
Does one of them look like a panther and the other looks like a jaguar? No, there's another Automan joke in there, but I don't want to reveal too much of the plot line for next week. So, and actually the week after that, number 4 is Jennifer Slept Here. And also, in case you're wondering, the episode numbers and the submissions aren't going to match. I'll tell you that right now, because next week is episode 3. But was Manimal and Automan, were they the third submission? No. I'm not going to tell you what number they are, but they're higher than 3. Higher than 4. No, not 5. But yeah, we'll be here next week, and we're going to suffer our way through Automan and Manimal as our tribute to 1983 NBC continues. Do you just hear my enthusiasm when I say 1983 NBC? Yeah,
I if you were any more excited, you would be Stonehenge.
Oh, I'm so excited for this. I can't even tell you. I cannot wait for next week's episode because Manimal. Can't wait to finally talk about it. I'm gonna love every second of it.
At least one of us is anticipating this.
Oh, come on! I get to talk about Simon McCorkindale on the podcast. How many times am I going to talk about... I'm never going to talk about Falcon Crest on the podcast.
No, because it's lasted forever.
We can make exceptions.
Well, well, true. We can.
We're not going to, but we can make exceptions. So remember, you can find us on Twitter, on Tumblr, on Facebook, on Instagram. Oh my gosh, I added an Instagram because apparently I want to be just as cool as the teenagers I teach at school. We're at all those with the handle It Was a Thing on TV. So find us at facebook.com/itwasthingontv, twitter.com/itwasthingontv, and on Tumblr at itwasthingontv.tumblr.com, and at Instagram at instagram.com/itwasthingontv. And then our main site is itwasthingontv.podbean.com. Maybe a domain will be coming soon. Maybe. We'll see. But for now, thank you to Chico, the third half of our group. I still can't get fractions right. I'm sorry. And thank you to Greg as always. And I'm Mike Klaus, and we'll be back next week after suffering through Automan and Manimal. Wow. And if we have to suffer, you have to suffer. See you next week.
Wow, Manimal.